He's still alive. Lauren Mitchell's voice cut through the funeral hall like a blade through silk. 200 heads snapped toward the back row where she stood, fingers digging into the wooden pew in front of her. The mahogany casket sat elevated on a marble platform, drowning in white chrysanthemums that filled the room with a smell so thick it pressed against the back of her throat. Cameras mounted on tripods blinked red. Men in suits worth more than her car stopped mid-prayer. Women in black veils turned to stare. "He's still alive," she said again, louder this time. Her voice didn't shake anymore. 2 security guards in black jackets pushed through the crowd, their faces blank and professional. A woman near the front let out a sharp gasp. Someone in the middle rows laughed nervously, the sound dying quickly when no one joined in. A man whispered something in Korean. Another hissed for her to sit down. But Lauren didn't move. She stepped into the center aisle, her borrowed heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Every step echoed. Her eyes stayed locked on that sealed wooden box surrounded by flowers Thomas had always hated. Before we go any further, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the truth always finds a way to the surface, no matter how deep it's buried. Because this story is only just beginning, and what happens next will change everything. 5 days before the funeral, Lauren had been finishing the tail end of a brutal double shift at Seattle General Hospital. Her scrubs stuck to her back with sweat. Her feet ached. The fluorescent lights in the nurse's station buzzed like insects. She was logging her last patient notes when her phone vibrated against the counter. Unknown number. 3 words on a black screen. Leave the city. She stared at those words for a full 10 seconds. Read them twice. Then deleted the message and grabbed her coat. Instead of driving home to her small apartment in Capitol Hill, she pointed her car south toward the industrial district. Toward a place she'd been specifically told never to visit alone. The warehouse sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by shipping containers that formed walls of rusted metal. No street lights. No other cars. Just empty silence and the distant sound of highway traffic. The door was unlocked when she tried it. Inside, a single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across concrete floors. Thomas Lee sat at a metal desk that looked like it came from a school surplus sale. Papers covered every inch of the surface. A half-empty water bottle sat near his elbow. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. He looked thinner than the last time she'd seen him, 2 weeks ago. Dark circles carved shadows under his eyes. "You shouldn't have come here," he said without looking up from whatever he was reading. Lauren let the door close behind her with a heavy metal sound. "Then stop sending me cryptic text messages in the middle of the night." Thomas finally lifted his head. His face looked hollow. Worn down. Like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. "You need to leave Seattle. Tonight. Get in your car, drive to your sister's place in Portland, and stay there." She crossed her arms, stayed where she was. "Not until you tell me what's happening." He stood slowly, like his body hurt, and walked to the only window in the warehouse. Dirty glass. View of an empty parking lot. "My brother has been stealing from me for the past 8 months. Moving money through companies that don't exist. Setting up accounts in countries I've never done business in. He thinks I'm too distracted to notice." Lauren felt her stomach drop. "Brandon?" Thomas turned to face her. His expression was flat. "Empty. And my mother has been helping him do it." The warehouse suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Lauren had only met Thomas's mother once, 6 months into their relationship. A woman who wore designer clothes like armor and looked at Lauren like she was tracking mud across an expensive carpet. His brother Brandon was different but equally dangerous. Always smiling. Always asking questions that felt like tests. Always acting like he was owed something he hadn't earned yet. "What are you going to do?" Lauren asked, even though part of her already knew the answer. Thomas sat back down at the desk. The chair creaked under his weight. I'm going to die. Her lungs stopped working for a second. What? Not actually. But they need to believe I am. He tapped the stack of papers with one finger. I've spent 3 months documenting everything. Every transfer. Every forged signature. Every lie. But if I confront them now, today, they'll destroy the evidence and disappear. The money will vanish into accounts I'll never find. They'll walk away clean. Lauren moved closer to the desk. Her legs felt unsteady. You want to fake your own death. It's the only way to force the truth into the open. People reveal who they really are when they think they've already won. When they think no one's watching anymore. She pulled out the folding chair across from him and sat down hard. This is insane. Thomas looked at her directly. His eyes were tired but clear. So is letting them steal everything and pretend to mourn me afterward. They sat in silence for a moment. Somewhere outside, a truck rumbled past on the main road. The sound faded into nothing. Lauren spoke first. What do you need from me? Leave, Thomas said simply. When this happens, when I disappear, anyone connected to me becomes a target. They'll look for loose ends. You're not safe here. Lauren leaned forward, elbows on the desk. I stayed quiet for 3 years because your family expected you to marry someone else. I hid while your mother acted like I didn't exist. I smiled and nodded while Grace Park sat at family dinners in the seat that should have been mine. I'm not running now. Thomas reached across the desk and took her hand. His palm was warm. If you stay, you have to trust me completely. Even when it looks real. Even when it hurts. I trust you. He pulled a business card from his shirt pocket and slid it across the metal surface. This is William Chen. He's arranging everything. The funeral logistics. The documentation. He has connections with the funeral home we'll be using. He'll make sure everything looks legitimate. Lauren picked up the card. Heavy stock. Simple black text. What do you mean he's arranging everything? Thomas met her eyes. The casket will be empty. But no one can know that. Not the pallbearers. Not the guests. Not even most of the funeral home staff. William has arranged for the coffin to be weighted properly so it feels real when it's moved. He's worked with the director directly. Only 3 people will know the truth. Me. Him. And you. Her hand shook slightly holding the card. And then what happens? Then you go to the funeral. You sit in the back. You watch them perform. And when the moment is right, you tell everyone the truth. What if they don't believe me? Thomas stood up, walked around the desk, crouched beside her chair so they were eye level. They will. Because I'll walk through those doors myself. Lauren looked at him for a long time. Studied the lines around his eyes. The gray coming in at his temples. The way his jaw was set with absolute certainty. You're really going to do this? I have to. It's the only way. She nodded slowly. Then I'm in. Thomas squeezed her shoulder once, then stood and walked back to his side of the desk. It happens in 2 days. I'll collapse during a business meeting downtown. Paramedics will take me to your hospital. You won't be allowed near me. That's important. You have to stay away. Let them perform for the cameras. Lauren's throat felt tight. How long will you be gone? 4 days. Maybe 5. I'll be moved to a private location. You won't hear from me. No calls. No messages. Nothing. She nodded again, not trusting her voice. 2 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Thomas Lee collapsed during a meeting with 3 business partners in a downtown conference room. Someone called 911. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes. They loaded him onto a stretcher and rushed him to Seattle General Hospital with sirens blaring and lights flashing. Lauren was working the cardiac unit when she heard the commotion downstairs. She made it to the hallway outside the emergency room just in time to see them wheel him past. His eyes were closed. An oxygen mask covered his face. Doctors shouted instructions. Nurses moved with controlled urgency. She pressed herself against the wall and watched through the window as they worked on him. Chest compressions. Defibrillator. Someone called for medications she knew by heart. Brandon showed up 18 minutes later. He pushed through the emergency room doors like he owned the building, his face twisted into an expression that might have been concern if you didn't look too closely. Their mother arrived an hour after that. She wore a dark gray dress and a black coat. No jewelry. Hair pulled back. She looked like someone who'd been preparing for this moment. Lauren stayed in the shadows. Watched them perform their roles. Brandon paced the hallway, made phone calls, ran his hands through his hair. His voice shook when he talked to the doctors, asking questions he already knew the answers to. Their mother sat perfectly still in the waiting room, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. Grace Park arrived shortly before midnight, wearing black like she'd received advance notice. Just before 1 in the morning, the doctor emerged from the emergency room. His face was drawn. Exhausted. He pulled off his surgical mask and faced the family. "I'm very sorry. We did everything we could. He's gone." Brandon made a sound like someone had punched him in the stomach. He sagged against the wall, one hand over his mouth. Their mother stood slowly, her face completely blank. Grace covered her face with both hands. Lauren, standing 20 feet away near the nurse's station, felt her knees go weak even though she knew this was the plan. Even though Thomas had warned her. The words still hit like stones. She left through the side exit near the parking garage. Walked to her car in the dark. Sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes with her hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Her phone stayed silent. No messages. No calls. Nothing. The funeral was scheduled for Friday. 3 days away. Lauren went to work. Came home. Slept badly. Ate almost nothing. Her coworkers asked if she was okay. She said she was fine. Just tired. No one pushed. On Thursday night, she got a text from an unknown number. Gray suit. Back row. Trust the process. She read it 5 times, then deleted it. Friday morning, she borrowed a black dress from her roommate. It hung loose on her frame. Too big in the shoulders. She didn't own funeral clothes. Hadn't needed them. She drove to the venue 2 hours early and sat in her car in the parking lot, watching people arrive in expensive vehicles. Town cars. SUVs with tinted windows. Everyone wore black. Everyone looked somber. Everyone belonged there except her. The funeral hall was massive. Vaulted ceilings. Marble floors. Stained glass windows that filtered sunlight into colored patterns on the ground. The casket sat at the front on a raised platform, polished mahogany reflecting the overhead lights. White chrysanthemums covered every surface. Hundreds of them. The smell was overwhelming. Sweet and heavy and wrong. Security stood at the entrance with tablets, checking names against a list. Lauren watched 3 people get turned away. She stood at the back of the line, her borrowed dress feeling like a costume, her hands sweating. When she reached the front, the guard looked at his screen, then at her. Name? Lauren Mitchell. He scrolled. Scrolled again. Shook his head. You're not on the guest list. Her chest tightened. I need to be here. I'm sorry. Family and approved guests only. She opened her mouth to argue when a voice spoke from behind her. She's with me. Lauren turned. A man in a gray suit stood 2 feet away. Average height. Thin build. Wire-rimmed glasses. He held up a badge to the security guard, who glanced at it and nodded. Go ahead. The man gestured for Lauren to follow him. They walked through the entrance together. Once inside, he handed her a visitor badge. Put this on. Sit in the back row on the left side. Stay quiet until you know it's time. How will I know? You'll know. He walked away before she could ask anything else. Lauren found a seat in the last row. The hall was filling quickly. Rows and rows of people in expensive clothes. Politicians she recognized from the news. Business owners. Community leaders. Everyone who mattered in Seattle. Everyone who wanted to be seen mattering. She watched Brandon work the room. He stood near the front, shaking hands, accepting condolences with a solemn nod. His eyes were red but dry. Their mother sat in the first row, a black veil covering her face. Grace Park sat 3 rows back, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The woman Thomas's family had wanted him to marry. The woman who'd been pushed aside when Thomas chose his own path. The service began at 11. A pastor walked to the podium and spoke about loss, about legacy, about the fragility of life. His voice echoed through the hall. People bowed their heads. A business partner gave a eulogy about Thomas's vision and generosity. Brandon stepped up to the microphone and talked about brotherhood, about family, about memories that would last forever. His voice cracked in all the right places. Lauren sat perfectly still, her hands gripping the edge of the pew in front of her. She felt like she was underwater. Everything sounded distant. Muffled. Her chest hurt. Her throat was tight. She knew this was fake. She knew Thomas was alive. But her body didn't believe it. Her body thought she was watching someone she loved disappear forever. Then she saw it. Brandon checked his watch. Quick glance. Barely a movement. Then he did it again 90 seconds later. Their mother leaned close, whispered something against his ear. Brandon nodded slightly. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. But close. They weren't mourning. They were waiting for this to be over. The realization burned through Lauren's chest like acid. She stood before she consciously decided to move. The sound of her standing echoed. Chairs creaked. Heads turned. Whispers started immediately. A man sitting behind her grabbed her wrist. Sit down, he hissed. She yanked her arm free. Stepped into the center aisle. Her voice came out raw and too loud. He's still alive. The hall exploded into noise. Voices collided with each other. Someone shouted, "What did she say?" Cameras on tripods swiveled toward her. Security guards pushed through the crowd from 3 different directions. Brandon's face went completely white. Their mother stood abruptly, her veil falling backward off her head. What is this woman saying? She's disturbed. Someone remove her. Get her out of here. Lauren ignored all of it. She pointed directly at the casket. He's still alive. If I'm wrong, prove it. Open the coffin. Brandon moved fast, stepping toward her with his hands raised like he was trying to calm a dangerous animal. This woman has been unstable since my brother's death. She's been harassing our family. She clearly needs professional help. Lauren turned to face him directly. Her voice was steady now. If I'm lying, then you have nothing to hide. Open the casket and prove me wrong. The entire hall went silent. 200 people holding their breath at once. Brandon's jaw clenched. That's incredibly disrespectful to my brother's memory. So is stealing from him while he was dying, Lauren said. The gasps that followed were like a wave rolling through the room. People turned to each other. Whispers exploded. Cameras zoomed in closer. Their mother's hands started shaking at her sides. Security reached Lauren. 2 guards grabbed her arms, one on each side. Pain shot through her shoulders. They started pulling her backward toward the exit. She struggled, but they were too strong. Brandon addressed the crowd, his voice rising above the noise. I sincerely apologize for this disruption. We will handle this matter privately and appropriately. No, a new voice cut through the chaos. Everyone turned. The man in the gray suit stepped forward from the side of the room. He carried a leather folder under his arm. He walked straight to the front without hesitation. Brandon pointed at him. Who are you? My name is William Chen. The man opened the folder. Papers spilled out into his hands. And I have documentation of every fraudulent transfer made from Thomas Lee's accounts over the past 8 months. The hall erupted again. Louder this time. People stood up. Shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Brandon backed away, shaking his head violently. That's fabricated. This is a setup. You're lying. William held up the papers for everyone to see. Bank statements. Wire transfer confirmations. Emails with Brandon's signature. Then I'm sure you won't mind if we open the casket to settle this once and for all. Brandon looked at his mother. She looked at Grace. Grace looked at the floor. The funeral director, a thin man in his 60s wearing a black suit, stood off to the side. He caught William's eye. William gave a barely perceptible nod. The director approached the casket slowly. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the lid. The hall had gone completely silent again. No whispers. No movement. Just breathing. He lifted the lid. Empty. For exactly 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Then chaos detonated. People shouted. Jumped to their feet. Cameras surged forward like a wave. Security tried to restore order, but there were too many people moving at once. Brandon tried to push toward the exit, but guards blocked his path. Their mother collapsed back into her seat, her face the color of ash. Grace put both hands over her mouth. The back doors opened. Thomas Lee walked in. He looked different. Thinner. His face was pale. But he was unmistakably alive. His eyes swept across the room slowly, taking in every face, every reaction. He walked down the center aisle with measured steps. Nobody tried to stop him. People moved out of his way like water parting. He reached the front and stopped directly beside the empty casket. His gaze landed on Brandon. Hello, brother. Brandon made a choking sound. Stumbled backward. This isn't real. You're dead. I saw you die. Thomas turned to William, who was already connecting a laptop to the projector screen that had been set up for a memorial slideshow. Files appeared on the white screen. Transaction records. Email chains. Forged signatures. Brandon's name on every single document. You thought I was too busy to notice, Thomas said quietly. His voice carried through the hall even though he wasn't shouting. Too distracted running the business to see what you were doing behind my back. But I saw everything. Brandon's face twisted. You set me up. No, Thomas replied. You buried yourself. I just decided to stop pretending I didn't see you digging. Police officers entered through both side doors. 4 of them in uniform. 2 plainclothes detectives behind them. Brandon tried to move toward the exit again, but an officer stepped in front of him. His mother sat completely frozen, staring at Thomas like he'd risen from the grave. Grace had started crying, real tears this time, the kind that came from fear instead of grief. Thomas turned to address the entire room. "I apologize for the deception. I know this has been traumatic for many of you. But sometimes the only way to expose the truth is to give lies enough space to reveal themselves." He walked down the aisle toward Lauren. Security had released her arms. She stood in the middle of the aisle, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking. Thomas stopped in front of her. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head. "You did." "No. You stood up when it mattered." That took real courage. The room erupted into noise again, but Lauren couldn't hear any of it. Only his voice. Only the sound of her own heartbeat finally slowing down. Police led Brandon toward the exit in handcuffs. He didn't resist. Didn't speak. Just walked with his head down. Their mother was escorted out separately, 2 officers on either side of her. She kept her spine straight, her face blank, but her hands trembled. Grace left through a side door, trying to avoid the cameras. The crowd slowly emptied. Whispers. Recording. Already posting to social media. Already spreading the story faster than any official statement could. Thomas and Lauren stood alone near the empty casket. She looked at it, at the flowers he'd always hated, at the expensive wood and polished handles. "I thought I'd lost you." "You couldn't," he said. "Not really. What happens now?" Thomas glanced at William, who was packing up the laptop. "Now we do the hard part. Rebuilding correctly." The next morning, Thomas sat in a conference room across town, signing papers that dismantled half his organization and restructured what remained. Lauren sat beside him, her phone buzzing constantly with calls from reporters she'd never answer. William entered with another folder. "Your brother is cooperating with investigators. Your mother's legal team is stalling, but the evidence is overwhelming. They won't be able to fight this." Thomas nodded slowly. "What about the business?" William laid out new documents. "Restructured completely. Legitimate operations only. No more gray areas. It'll take 6 months minimum. Maybe longer." Thomas looked at Lauren. "What do you think?" She met his gaze. "I think you should do what's right. Not what's easy." He smiled slightly. "That's why I asked." William cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. The board wants to create a new position. Independent ethics oversight. Someone with no ties to the old system." Thomas slid a contract across the table to Lauren. "It's yours if you want it." She stared at the paper. "I don't know how to run a company." "You know about truth," Thomas said. "That's rarer than you think." Lauren picked up a pen. Her hand shook slightly. Then she signed her name in black ink. 3 months later, the transformation was visible. Properties sold. Bad partnerships dissolved. New leadership installed. Thomas stepped back from daily operations, focusing instead on building programs for workers who'd been exploited under the old structure. Lauren became the face of the ethics division. She spoke at community meetings. Met with labor advocates. Listened to people who'd never been heard. Slowly, fear stopped following her everywhere. One evening, she found Thomas on the roof of their office building, watching lights spread across the city below. She stood beside him without speaking for a long moment. "Do you regret it?" she asked finally. "Which part?" "All of it. The fake death. The public exposure. Destroying your relationship with your family." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "I regret not acting sooner. I regret letting fear keep me quiet for so long." Lauren nodded. She understood that now. Fear was a choice. So was courage. Brandon was sentenced to 6 years for fraud and conspiracy. Their mother received 3 years and forfeited all assets tied to illegal activity. Grace Park disappeared from Seattle entirely. No forwarding address. Thomas and Lauren stopped hiding. They attended charity events together. Gave interviews about their work. Answered questions about that day at the funeral over and over. Lauren always said the same thing. I spoke the truth. That's all. But she knew it was more. She'd stood when sitting was easier. She'd spoken when silence was safer. She'd chosen truth over comfort. And that choice changed everything. A year later, the foundation opened its first community center. Small building in the neighborhood where Thomas grew up. Resources for job training. Legal help. Healthcare access. Real support instead of empty promises. Thomas stood at the entrance with Lauren, cutting a ribbon while cameras flashed. But the cameras felt different now. Not threatening. Just documenting something good. A young woman approached afterward, a small child holding her hand. She looked at Lauren with wide eyes. You're the one from the funeral. Lauren nodded. Yes. The woman's voice shook. I've been scared to report problems at my job. Safety issues. Harassment. But watching what you did gave me courage. I reported them last week. They're being investigated. Lauren's throat tightened. That took real bravery. The woman smiled. So did what you did. She walked away with her child. Thomas watched her go, then looked at Lauren. You changed more than you know. Lauren shook her head. I just said what needed to be said. She did the rest. That night, Lauren stood in front of her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. She looked different. Not younger or older. Just more solid. More real. The woman who'd hidden in shadows was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that silence protected nothing worth protecting. Thomas appeared in the doorway. You okay? She turned to face him. Yeah. I really am. He pulled her close. Thank you for not giving up. She smiled against his shoulder. Thank you for trusting me. They stood there quietly. Two people who'd survived deception and emerged stronger. They hadn't rebuilt perfectly. But they'd rebuilt honestly. And that was everything. If you were in that funeral hall, surrounded by lies and performance, would you have found the courage to speak? Would you have risked everything to tell the truth? Lauren did. And she didn't just save one person. She exposed an entire system. If this story reminded you that your voice matters, that silence protects wrongdoing while courage protects truth, leave a comment below. Tell us one thing you've been too afraid to say. One truth you've been holding back. And if you believe these stories deserve to be heard, subscribe. Because right now, somewhere, someone is waiting for permission to speak up. Your voice might be what gives them the courage they need. Don't let fear decide for you. Not today. Not ever. Hit that subscribe button for more stories.